something strange happens on June 20th. It keeps happening. Over 3 separate centuries, on this exact date, the world changed direction in ways nobody predicted, announced by people who were barely awake, sitting in rooms that smelled of ink and candle smoke and copper wire. 3 times, June 20th reached into the future and pulled something new out of it. And the world that woke up the next morning was never quite the same as the one that went to sleep. The first time was 1782. You are standing in Philadelphia. Not the Philadelphia you know. No glass towers, no highway interchanges, no street noise bouncing off concrete. Just unpaved roads, wooden buildings, and the suffocating heat of a Pennsylvania summer pressing down on everything like a wet wool blanket. A new country has just finished fighting for its life. The United States of America exists on paper, but barely. The ink on the peace treaty is still almost wet. The economy is in ruins. The states barely trust each other. And today, the men who built this experiment are arguing about a bird. The Continental Congress needed a national seal, an emblem, something that would appear on official documents and say to the world, this is who we are. The problem is that these conversations had been going on for 6 years. 6 full years. 3 separate committees, 14 separate design proposals, all of them rejected. Most countries do not take 6 years to name a municipal park, let alone design the face of a new civilization. But this one did. Finally, on June 20th, 1782, Secretary of Congress Charles Thomson sat down with designer William Barton and made the kind of decision that committees almost never manage to make. He chose a bird, the bald eagle, and historian Margaret Chrisman, in her detailed study of early American iconography, notes that the selection process was considerably more contested than most people realize, because there was a serious competing candidate, and the man who preferred it made his case without embarrassment. Benjamin Franklin thought the bald eagle was a bird of bad moral character. Those are his actual words, written in a letter to his daughter, Sarah Botch. Franklin called the eagle a cowardly thief, a bird who regularly stole fish from smaller hawks who had done all the real work of catching it. He watched bald eagles get chased out of trees by kingbirds, birds a fraction of their size, and he took careful mental notes. What Franklin preferred instead was the wild turkey, native to America, alert, brave, a bird that would, he wrote, not hesitate to attack a British grenadier who invades its farmyard. Imagine that alternative world for a moment. A turkey on every federal building, a turkey on your passport, a turkey staring back at you from the back of a quarter. It almost happened. But Thomson chose the eagle. Congress ratified the decision on June 20th, 1782, and a symbol was born that would eventually end up on the surface of the moon. The question worth sitting with is this: how many symbols you take for granted were, at some point, one tired committee member's judgment call made on an unremarkable summer afternoon? The second time June 20th changed everything was 1837. You are 18 years old, and you have never truly been alone. Your entire life has been a controlled environment, monitored, managed, scheduled by people who decided everything for you. Your mother and her closest advisor have determined who you may speak to, where you may travel, what lessons you receive, and how many people are allowed in any room when you are present. You sleep in your mother's bedroom, not your own, hers, at 18. And on the night of June 19th, you go to sleep not knowing that this is the last ordinary night of your life. At 6 o'clock in the morning on June 20th, 1837, servants came to wake Princess Victoria of England. They told her that King William IV had died in the early hours. There was no king. There was only her. She was, as of that moment, Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, Empress-in-waiting of a realm that would eventually stretch across roughly 1/4 of the Earth's entire surface. Biographer Lytton Strachey, whose exhaustive portrait of Victoria remains one of the most cited accounts of her early reign, described the moment in careful detail. She received the news with composure that surprised the men delivering it. She wept briefly. Then she steadied herself. Then, for the first time in her life, she received official visitors without her mother present in the room. That detail sounds small. It was not small. It was the first act of a reign that would last 63 years, a reign in which she survived 8 separate assassination attempts, presided over the industrial transformation of an entire continent, outlasted dozens of prime ministers, expanded an empire to its greatest reach, and eventually gave her name to a full century of human history. She was 18, woken before sunrise, had not yet eaten breakfast. Think about what you believed at 18, what you thought you understood about the world, what decisions you felt qualified to make. Then imagine being handed 1/4 of the planet on a quiet Tuesday morning before the sun is fully up. Victoria's story does not begin with a prepared speech or a choreographed coronation ceremony. It begins with knocking on a bedroom door, a teenager sitting up in the dark, a single sentence changing the answer to every question that came after it. Historian A.N. Wilson, in his biography of Victoria, argues that the very isolation of her upbringing, the thing that was meant to control her, was what made her impossible to control once she was queen. She had no attachments to any political faction, no debts to any party. She was entirely and unexpectedly her own. The third time June 20th changed everything was 1840. You are living in a world where the fastest information is a horse. You need to send a message from New York to New Orleans. A rider carries it to the next station. Another rider takes it from there. Then another. Then another. The message travels at whatever speed a human being can push an animal through the night. In the best conditions, this takes weeks. In bad weather, difficult terrain, or illness, it does not arrive at all. For the entirety of recorded human civilization, this is how knowledge traveled. Slowly, attached to a body that could get tired, lost, robbed, or simply stop. On June 20th, 1840, Samuel Morse received a United States patent for his electromagnetic telegraph, a machine that could send coded signals down a copper wire at something approaching the speed of light. Dots and dashes, short pulses and long pulses. A language built from scratch, now carrying his name across every language on Earth. Physicist Joseph Henry, whose earlier experiments with electromagnetism had directly shaped Morse's thinking and whom Morse later credited publicly, described the telegraph as a technology that would annihilate time and space, not as a figure of speech, as a literal description of what was about to happen to human civilization. And it did. Scholar Tom Standage, in his landmark book, The Victorian Internet, lays out the case in full, and researchers at institutions from MIT's Media Lab to the Smithsonian have echoed it in different forms. The telegraph was, in every structurally meaningful way, the Internet before the Internet existed. It created a global information network where none had existed. It changed how financial markets moved. It changed journalism. It changed how wars were planned, fought, and ended. A general could now receive battlefield intelligence the same hour it was observed. A newspaper could publish dispatches from the other side of the world before the day was finished. A merchant in London could receive a confirmation from New York before closing time. Morse's patent on June 20th, 1840, did not just replace the rider on the horse. It replaced the entire model of how human beings understood the relationship between distance and time. A message no longer needed to travel. A message could simply appear somewhere else, instantly, as if the space between sender and receiver had been folded entirely out of existence. Think about the last message you sent. Think about the exact moment your finger lifted from the screen and you assumed, without question, that the words you wrote were already somewhere else, not on their way, already there. That assumption, that reflex, that complete and unconsidered certainty that your words are immune to distance, traces a direct line back to a June afternoon in 1840, when a man watching signals travel down a copper wire understood that humanity had just crossed a threshold it could never uncross. 3 dates, 3 rooms, 3 ordinary mornings that turned out to be anything but. A bird, chosen by a tired committee after 6 years of arguments that almost went the other way. A teenager woken from sleep to find she had inherited a quarter of the world. A man watching dots travel down a wire and hearing for the first time the sound of a future that did not yet have a name. None of them could have known, in that exact moment, what they had started. Thomson could not have imagined the eagle on photographs taken from the surface of the moon. Victoria could not have imagined her face pressed onto stamps in nations that would not exist for another century. Morse could not have imagined the message you sent this morning, the one you typed in 3 seconds, sent without thinking, and forgot about almost immediately. But something strange keeps happening on June 20th. It reaches into the future and pulls something out. And every time it does, the world you wake up to the next morning is a slightly different world from the one you went to sleep believing in.